The refinery spine turned so slowly that the stars seemed to slide across it. Nessa Cole stood with one hand on the edge of the control rail while Astor Reach Assembly Yard rolled a half-built processing cylinder through another fraction of a degree. Warning strobes crawled along its black framework. 300 meters of temporary habitat rings clung to the spine like bright beads, each one still occupied by workers finishing the evacuation sequence. A yellow wax tab on Nessa's slate had begun to curl at one corner. "Vein 3 is taking more load," said Leo from the systems pit. "I see it." Nessa pressed 2 fingers to the slate and shifted 12% of the correction toward Morrow 5. Somewhere outside, one of the 6 mass tenders answered with a short burst from its maneuver clusters. The vibration reached the control room through the dock frame as a deep, familiar hum. Then every warning strobe on the refinery spine turned blue. For 1 second, nobody moved. A war declaration had arrived. The header filled the central pane in formal translation, wrapped in the heraldic marks of the Taraxian Galactic Empire. It named humanity as an enemy polity, listed claims of commercial obstruction and strategic defiance, and announced that Imperial forces were authorized to enter human-controlled space. Leo stared at it. Nessa looked back to the refinery rotation. "Keep the load inhabited," she said. That broke the room out of its silence. Workers were still inside the temporary habitats. Whatever the Empire had declared, an unfinished refinery section carrying people remained an unfinished refinery section carrying people. "Regional defense has acknowledged," said Mara from communications. "No general fleet order, no evacuation order beyond local discretion." "Good. Continue transfer." Mara looked at her. "That's it." Nessa glanced at the clock. "Until somebody gives me a reason to stop doing my job." Far from Astor Reach, Grand Marshal Urek Than received the same declaration as a ceremonial confirmation rather than a surprise. His command cruiser, Crown of Val, had already crossed the last Imperial relay boundary with 17 combat vessels arranged around it in disciplined attack geometry. To Than, the timing mattered. Civilizations revealed themselves in the first hours of war. Some panicked. Some flooded every channel with demands. Some mobilized before their diplomats had finished denying that mobilization was happening. Mature powers moved in patterns that doctrine could measure. Humanity did almost nothing. There were no fleet departures from Earth in the first 90 minutes. No mass jump signatures from the inner systems. No broadcast calling colonies to arms. No surge in military traffic toward the frontier. Human merchant routing changed around several declared exclusion zones, but even that appeared limited and methodical. Than watched the data settle on his command display. "They did not expect us," said his operations chief. "They expected eventually to be challenged," Than replied. "That is not the same thing as being ready." Tovin Arkle, the structural officer attached to the expedition, said nothing. His concern was smaller. Astor Reach had appeared in the navigation model as an industrial assembly site built around a starward construction lane. It lay directly across the shortest controlled route into the Linden Corridor. It possessed no registered capital warships and no orbital fortress. Its defense listing contained local patrol craft, radiation warning buoys, industrial drones, and 6 Morrow-class mass tenders. Tovin had never seen a Morrow-class tender. He opened the civilian registry record. The silhouette was ugly even by human standards. A broad rectangular body, 4 articulated veins, heavy maneuver clusters, thick impact structure, no visible fighter capacity, no spinal weapon, no military armor profile worth naming. "Docking craft," said the operations chief after glancing at the image. Tovin enlarged the listed mass handling envelope. The number looked wrong. He checked the unit conversion, then checked it again. Before he could speak, Than ordered the fleet toward Astor Reach. The human yard appeared as a loose constellation of work lights around a dark central axis. Construction frames floated beside pressure habitats. An incomplete refinery spine extended across the fleet's approach vector, moving with deliberate slowness. The human military presence was almost insulting in its absence. No battle line formed, no interceptor wing came out. Only the 6 blunt tenders changed position. A voice entered Crown of Val on open traffic control. "This is Astor Reach Industrial Authority," said a human woman. Imperial formation, you are approaching an active heavy mass work volume. Hold outside marker line blue while we clear inhabited structures. Than looked at the tactical plot. The blue marker was a civilian construction boundary. Identify your military authority, he said. The answer came after a brief pause. Local defense coordination has been notified. I am Superintendent Nessa Cole. You are currently entering my work zone. A few officers shifted at their stations. Than did not smile. This is Grand Marshal Uruk Than of the Taraxian Galactic Empire. A state of war exists between your government and mine. Withdraw your equipment and clear our route. We have workers inside the rotating structure. Then remove them. We are. Than glanced at the timer beside the route projection. How long? 22 minutes. We will not wait. Then do not cross marker line blue. Than cut the channel. The warning was so ordinary that it felt like evidence. Humanity had been caught at work. Its officials were improvising around civilian schedules because no serious force was present. The industrial supervisor had not threatened retaliation. She had not claimed hidden defenses. She had merely asked an invasion fleet to wait for a safety procedure. Advance, Than said. The fleet crossed the blue marker. At Aster Reach, Nessa watched the first Imperial destroyer pass the line. Record the violation, she said. Recorded habitats, 212 workers still attached to the spine. Transfer tunnels are clear on rings 4 through 7. Keep moving them. Leo looked at the tactical feed. They're not slowing. I can see that. Morrow 2 has a custody solution on the lead destroyer. Nessa hesitated. A mass tender's custody field was not a weapon in the ordinary sense. It was a distributed system used to arrest, rotate, tow, and align objects too large or too fragile to handle with point force tractors. It worked best when the target structure could be mapped and the load could be spread. Warships were not on the approved civilian catalog. They did, however, obey physics. Low gradient, she said. No hard stop. Keep the load inhabited. Leo repeated the phrase into the tender net. Outside, Morrow 2 opened its custody vanes. There was no beam, no flash, no visible wall. The lead Imperial destroyer simply stopped drifting sideways. Its forward motion continued for another second, then softened as the tender matched its velocity. The destroyer's engines flared brighter. On Crown of Vol, alarms chimed. Lead ship reports loss of lateral authority, said operations. Engine failure? No. External interference? Tovin was already reading the structural telemetry. The destroyer's hull was experiencing force at hundreds of distributed points, each tiny enough to avoid local damage. The pattern shifted continuously as the ship's own engines pushed against it. He felt a cold tightness under his jaw. This is not a tractor lock, he said. Than looked over. What is it? I do not yet know. The destroyer increased thrust. Its bow moved less than a meter, then stopped. Tovin opened the Morrow registry again. The strange mass handling number remained where it had been. Than ordered 2 cruisers forward to support the destroyer and break whatever civilian mechanism held it. The human voice returned. Grand Marshal, reduce thrust. Than accepted the channel. You are restraining an Imperial warship. You crossed an active work boundary after warning. You are now participating in hostilities. Nessa's answer came level and almost tired. We are preventing an armed vessel from entering an inhabited construction structure. Than leaned toward the display. Release it. Back your formation outside marker line blue. The destroyer's engines flared again. Tovin saw the human field change, not strengthen. Redistribute. The new force map widened across the destroyer's frame. Areas under increased Imperial thrust received less local counterforce, not more. Other areas took the load instead, spreading stress through the hull's existing reinforcement lattice. It was the opposite of how a military tractor behaved. A military tractor seized. This system managed. Grand Marshal Tovin said, order the destroyer to stop increasing thrust. Than's eyes narrowed. Reason. The humans are reading its load paths. Of course they are. They are trying to hold it. No, they are keeping the ship inside its structural limits while they hold it. That made the bridge quieter. Than looked at the destroyer's status. No hull alarms, no frame distortion, no shield collapse, no weapon damage. Only movement denied. Then we overload their system, he said. He ordered the two cruisers to engage their own drives and pull in opposite directions around the captured destroyer, creating a compound force problem. The maneuver was sound. Against conventional restraint systems, it should have worked. At Aster Reach, Leo swore softly. They're loading across 3 hulls. Nessa watched the stress model fill. Split custody. We only have 1 tender actively mapped. Bring 3 and 4 into the envelope. Share the geometry? Morrow 3 rolled above the destroyer. Morrow 4 slid below the first cruiser. Their articulated veins opened like slow mechanical fins. The deep vibration in the yard changed pitch. A wax tab on Nessa's slate curled farther. Too much on 3's forward vein, she said, correcting. Morrow 4 took more load. Outside, the 3 Imperial ships pushed against the human system. Nothing dramatic happened. That was what disturbed Tovin most. No violent counterstroke met the thrust. No engine flare answered engine flare. The humans simply moved force from one place to another until the Imperial ships were fighting a geometry that refused to give them the structural weak point they expected. Tovin enlarged the tender registry specification. The number could no longer be ignored. He turned toward Than. Grand Marshal, I need permission to query their industrial mass records. Than's expression hardened. This is a battle. Yes. Then why are you asking me about construction records? Because I think that is what we are fighting. Than stared at him for 1 beat, then authorized the query. The result came back from open commercial registries. Morrow-class tenders had been designed to handle refinery sections, ore carriers, failed fusion smelter blocks, pressurized habitat trusses, and drive-disabled freight assemblies. Tovin read the figures. He stopped breathing for a moment. The unfinished refinery spine rotating beside the fleet had a working mass several times greater than Crown of Vol. That was without its completed processing drums. He checked again. The number did not change. On Aster Reach, another worker habitat disconnected from the refinery spine and drifted toward the safe transfer frame. Nessa marked it green. Rings 8 and 9 clear. Good. Mara looked at the distant Imperial formation. Should I ask regional defense for ships? They know where we are. That's not what I asked. Nessa rubbed the curled wax tab flat with her thumb, then let it rise again. If we ask for combat ships, we turn this volume into a combat volume. I still have 183 people in temporary habitats and an unfinished spine under active rotation. So we hold them with tenders? We keep them from crossing the work zone, and if they shoot... Nessa looked at her. Then the problem changes. The Empire fired first. It was not a full broadside. Than ordered a precision strike against one of the outer custody vanes on Morrow 2, intending to break the hold without destroying the human craft. The cruiser's weapon flashed. Morrow 2 rolled. The shot passed through the space its vane had occupied and struck an empty construction brace. The brace spun away in a shower of glowing fragments. Nessa's face tightened. Everyone's still green. Green. Move the tender envelope inward. Keep civilian habitats behind the refinery spine. Than saw the human response and waited for escalation. None came. No hidden battery opened fire, no missile swarm appeared. The tenders changed position. Their custody fields widened. A second Imperial destroyer lost maneuver authority. Then a third. Than's operations chief looked at him. They're taking ships one at a time. Then we stop giving them one at a time. Than had spent 40 years breaking enemy systems by finding the assumption beneath them. He would not insult himself by pretending the humans had no limit. 6 tenders, 18 Imperial hulls, distributed custody required active mapping and load management. The humans could not hold everything at once. He ordered the fleet to separate. Not retreat. Disperse. Every mobile vessel received a unique escape vector away from the trapped lid group. Cruisers accelerated high. Destroyers cut low, logistics escorts reversed thrust, Crown of Vol shifted laterally behind them, the human control display erupted with new tracks. Leo stared. There it is. Nessa nodded once. The Grand Marshal had found the capacity problem. Morrow 1 through 6. Prepare rolling custody. Do not chase. Protect the habitats first. The first Imperial cruiser broke free of the field edge. Another followed. Toven felt the bridge tilt as Crown of Vol accelerated. There, said operations. They cannot cover the formation. Than did not answer yet. He was watching the refinery spine. The humans released it. Asta Reach's construction cradle opened its holding clamps. For the first time since the fleet had arrived, the immense unfinished structure was fully free-moving. Than's eyes narrowed. Target that structure if it turns toward us. Toven looked at him sharply. It is inhabited. I said if it turns toward us. But the refinery spine did not turn toward the fleet. Its maneuver packs fired in short, carefully staggered bursts. The structure continued its slow rotation, but its center of mass began sliding across the work volume. Not as a weapon, as geometry. The Imperial ships dispersing through the yard now had to avoid an object too massive to ignore and too full of civilians to treat casually. Their safe vectors narrowed. The human tenders moved through those narrowed lanes. Morrow 2 released the first destroyer and seized a cruiser moving toward a habitat frame. Morrow 4 handed custody of another vessel to Morrow 6 for less than 3 seconds, enough for 4 to intercept an escort trying to pass beneath the refinery spine. The humans were not holding the whole fleet. They were controlling which paths remained usable. Toven watched the pattern form. Grand Marshal, I see it. No. Look at the refinery movement. Than magnified the plot. The unfinished spine crossed the center of the Imperial dispersal fan at an angle shallow enough to leave withdrawal routes open, but steep enough to close the direct approach toward the Linden corridor. The humans had transformed a construction schedule into a moving boundary. They planned this. Operations whispered. Toven shook his head. I do not think they did. That answer was worse. On Asta Reach, Nessa counted another habitat ring green. 121 workers remain. Leo glanced at her. They think we're maneuvering the spine against them. We're moving it to Base 6. That does happen to block the corridor. It blocks the corridor because Base 6 is across the corridor. Leo stared at her. Nessa gave him a look. Do not become theatrical while we are moving 4 billion tons of unfinished equipment. Leo looked back to his controls. Yes, Superintendent. The next Imperial maneuver was more disciplined. Than abandoned the idea of forcing every ship through at once. He concentrated 5 vessels on a single lane beneath the refinery spine, using their combined thrust to keep the tenders from establishing stable custody on all of them. It worked. For 22 seconds, the human field control slipped. One cruiser crossed another 6 kilometers toward the corridor. Toven saw the bridge crew recover some confidence. Then the cruiser stopped. Not because a tender had seized it. Because Morrow 5 had seized the logistics escort behind it and rotated that escort sideways across the lane, the cruiser could continue only by risking collision with its own ship. It cut thrust. Morrow 1 took custody. Than felt something inside his strategic model tear. Not collapse. Not yet, but tear. These civilians were not beating military maneuvers with military maneuvers. They were solving movement problems with the instincts of people who spent their lives preventing enormous objects from touching one another. He looked at Toven. What exactly do these tenders normally move? Toven brought up the registry list. Ore carriers with failed drives, reactor sleeves, incomplete habitat cylinders, refinery drums, structural trusses, mass relative to our cruisers. Toven hesitated. Usually greater? How much greater? Toven put the figure on the central display. No one spoke. Crown of Vol, pride of an Imperial expedition, massed less than one of the smaller refinery modules listed as routine Morrow custody work. Than leaned back. The implication was ridiculous. That did not make it false. The human industrial yard was handling warships carefully because in the mechanical sense that mattered to its equipment, Imperial warships were not especially difficult loads. Toven opened live telemetry from the unfinished refinery spine. A series of tiny strain indicators appeared across its couplings. He noticed a detail from the human registry diagrams, wax tabs, simple process consumables placed across temporary joints to show how loads migrated through changing structures. The humans had them everywhere. Not sensors in the sophisticated sense. Not weapons. A cheap physical confirmation that force was traveling where the model predicted. Toven zoomed in on one maintenance camera feed captured before hostilities. A human technician had pressed one flat with a thumb. The image bothered him more than any gun could have. "Grand Marshal," he said quietly. "They are using the same load discipline on us." Than looked at him. Toven pointed to the captured destroyer's structural map. "Here, here, and here. Their field shifts before our frame reaches local stress thresholds. They are not trying to overpower the hull. What are they trying to do? Keep the load inhabited." The phrase had appeared in an intercepted human work channel. Than had dismissed it as jargon. Now he understood enough to dislike it. The humans were treating the crews of Imperial warships as another reason not to exceed safe acceleration. The Empire had declared war. The humans had responded with occupational safety. Than's pride resisted the thought. His training did not. A model that explained the evidence had to replace one that did not. He opened a private command channel. "All ships, cease independent thrust escalation, maintain formation discipline." Operations turned toward him. "Grand Marshal, we are feeding their system data every time we push without coordination." Then, what is the next maneuver? Than studied the 6 tender positions. The humans had shown him their strength. He would find the boundary. He ordered a layered breakout. Half the fleet would feint toward the corridor. The remainder would reverse around the refinery spine and force the tenders to decide between holding combat vessels and protecting worker habitats. If the humans chose the habitats, the rear group would escape. If they chose the rear group, the feint could become real. It was the first plan Than had made after fully abandoning the assumption that the tenders were harmless. That mattered. At Aster Reach, Nessa recognized the split almost immediately. "They're making us choose." Leo swallowed. "Can we hold both?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. Mara looked over. "Regional Defense says 2 patrol groups can reach us in 11 minutes. Nessa watched the Imperial vectors. 11 minutes was too long. "Tell them to hold outside the work volume unless I call." Mara blinked. "You're declining combat support. I'm declining extra high-velocity hulls inside a crowded construction site." The refinery spine crossed another degree. "Transfer status. 74 workers remain." Nessa tapped the slate. "We need 8 minutes." The Imperial split widened. Morrow 3 caught 1 destroyer. 5 tried to escape below the spine. Morrow 6 released a cruiser to block an escort. A second cruiser slipped through the outer custody envelope. For the first time, a clear path opened toward the Linden corridor. Than saw it. "Cruiser 12, take the lane." The cruiser accelerated. Its engines rose to full output. Aster Reach's display painted the ship amber. Leo looked at Nessa. "We can stop it if we swing the spine 5 degrees. Nessa checked the projected path. 5 degrees would put the refinery's unshielded framework directly across the cruiser's route. The Imperial commander would either turn or collide with billions of tons of human industrial structure. It would work. It would also turn the occupied refinery into a weapon. No, Leo stared. That ship gets through. Then we catch it another way. We may not have another way. We do not use inhabited equipment as ammunition. The cruiser crossed the outer marker. Morrow 2 was too far. Morrow 4 was committed. Morrow 1 rotated hard, custody vanes spread, but the geometry would not close in time. Then an ordinary cargo tug detached from Bay 6. It had no custody field worth mentioning. It carried a string of empty structural cages. Nessa opened a channel. Cargo Tug 9 released cages on construction drift. The tug pilot answered immediately, releasing 6 empty cages separated into the cruiser's lane. They were not weapons. They were obstacles moving under the published construction drift rule. The Imperial cruiser turned. That turn cost it 3 seconds. Morrow 1 arrived. The cruiser stopped. On Crown of Vol, Than shut his eyes once. The humans had not hidden another weapon. They had used empty cargo frames. His operations chief spoke carefully. We can continue pressing. Yes, we can force errors. Yes. Then, we are already forcing errors. Than opened his eyes. And they are spending effort to keep those errors from killing us. No one answered. Tovin watched the numbers. The expedition still possessed weapons superiority over the 6 tenders in the simplest sense. If Than ordered full fire, he could destroy civilian machinery, he could kill workers. He could turn Aster Reach into debris, but that was not the declared strategic objective. The objective was to penetrate human space, demonstrate Imperial initiative, and compel Earth to mobilize under disadvantage. Destroying an industrial yard while failing to pass, it would prove something else entirely. It would prove that the Empire needed fleet weapons to defeat construction equipment. Than knew it. So did everyone on the bridge. The final counter came from an accident. Cruiser 7 had been fighting its custody envelope longer than any other ship. Its pilot waited for a transfer between Morrow 4 and Morrow 6, then drove hard against the edge of the field. For one moment, the ship moved. Then its port maneuver cluster failed, not explosively. The thrust simply vanished on one side. The cruiser began to rotate. Tovin saw the new vector before the collision alarm sounded. Cruiser 7 was drifting toward Destroyer 3, which remained held nearly stationary by Morrow 2. Collision path operations called. Than snapped forward. Destroyer 3 emergency thrust. No authority, came the answer. Human field still has us. Cruiser 7, correct rotation. Port cluster unresponsive. The distance dropped. The humans could do nothing and win. Than saw it with brutal clarity. 2 Imperial ships would strike each other. Even at low relative speed, both would lose combat capability. The human tenders would have fewer active threats. No human weapon would fire. No blame would attach cleanly. A rational enemy might let physics finish the work. On Aster Reach, Leo looked at the closing tracks. If we maintain custody, they collide. Nessa was already moving. Release Destroyer 3. That frees an active warship. Release it. Morrow 2 releasing. The destroyer regained movement. 3 and 5. Catch Cruiser 7. Low gradient. Protect radiator clearance. Leo hesitated only long enough to understand. Then his hands moved. 2 human tenders abandoned stronger tactical positions. Morrow 3 released a cruiser it had spent minutes capturing. Morrow 5 broke from the outer lane. Their custody vanes opened around the drifting Imperial ship. The cruiser's rotation slowed. Not enough. More load on 5, Nessa said. 5 is at 86%. Take it to 92 for 4 seconds. That exceeds civilian continuous rating. 4 seconds. The deep vibration in the control room rose. One of the wax tabs beside Nessa's slate curled into a tight hook. Cruiser 7 rotated away from Destroyer 3. Distance stopped falling, then increased. Morrow 3 bled off the remaining spin. Morrow 5 lowered load. The 2 Imperial ships passed safely apart. For several seconds, Crown of Vol's bridge was silent except for ventilation. Than looked at the tactical plot. The released destroyer had a clear firing solution on Morrow 2. It did not fire. Its captain had watched the humans save Cruiser 7. Than opened the fleet channel. All vessels, weapons cold. Operations stared at him. Grand Marshal weapons cold across the Imperial formation. Targeting systems dropped from active status one after another. Nessa saw the change. Hold custody where necessary, she said. Do not increase. Mara exhaled. The refinery spine continued turning. One by one, the remaining worker habitats detached from it and moved toward safe frames. Last ring clear, said Leo. Nessa's shoulders lowered for the first time since the war declaration arrived. Confirm. Confirmed. 0 workers in exposed temporary habitats. Good. She keyed the open channel. Grand Marshal Than, our inhabited construction volume is now clear. Than answered after a long pause. What terms do you propose? Nessa looked at Mara, then back to the tactical display. Back your ships outside marker line blue. We release custody as each vessel establishes a safe outbound vector. No pursuit from this yard. You are offering withdrawal. I am offering a way to stop making this worse. Than studied the 6 Morrow-class tenders. One had a scorch section where the Imperial precision shot had missed its vein and clipped nearby framing. Another was running above normal thermal limits. None had fired a weapon. He had spent the last hour trying to prove that they were not enough. They had spent the same hour proving they were enough without using everything they could have done. He opened a command channel to Tovin. Your classification recommendation. Tovin already had it drafted. Human heavy industrial mass control platforms cannot be treated as civilian auxiliaries during hostile maneuver operations. Too narrow, Tovin looked at him. Than continued. They are strategic capability platforms when operating inside prepared industrial geometry. Tovin considered. Yes. Add that entry into the expedition report. Operations shifted uneasily. That report will go to the War Directorate. It should. Your command decision will be reviewed. It should. Than did not sound angry. That frightened the operations chief more than anger would have. The first Imperial destroyer backed away. Morrow II released it completely. The vessel maintained cold weapons and moved beyond marker line blue. Then another followed, and another. The humans did not chase. They did not tow trophies toward their docks. They did not demand crew surrender. They simply let each ship leave once its vector no longer threatened the work volume. Cruiser 7 took longer. Its failed maneuver cluster forced it to move under partial human guidance while an Imperial escort matched speed nearby. Nessa kept Morrow III attached to the cruiser's custody envelope until the ship was safely outside the rotating refinery's projected path. Release, she said. Morrow III released. The cruiser drifted free. Than watched the human tender back away. No flourish. No victory signal. No message. Just distance. The withdrawal itself became another test. Imperial doctrine preferred clean reversals. Ships backed from danger under synchronized control, maintaining mutual support until the formation could turn as one. Aster Reach did not offer that luxury. Several vessels remained under partial custody. Cruiser 7 could not trust its damaged maneuver cluster. 2 destroyers had hot engines from repeated escape attempts. One logistics ship had drifted near the refinery spine and needed a wide arc to clear the temporary habitat frames. Than could have ordered a simultaneous break and accepted the risk. He did not. Successful withdrawal, he said. Operations hesitated. That leaves ships exposed one at a time. To what? The officer glanced toward the human tenders. Than understood the hesitation. To equipment that has already had multiple opportunities to destroy them and declined. No one argued. Tovin began building exit lanes with human traffic data layered over Imperial navigation. The construction markings that had seemed irrelevant at arrival now mattered more than combat charts. Blue lines marked work volumes. Amber arcs showed rotational clearance. White cones represented maneuver pack exhaust. Green boxes indicated pressure habitats and occupied transfer frames. The humans had published all of it before the fleet arrived. Tovin found the original navigation bulletin. It had been transmitted automatically when Crown of Vol entered the system. Active heavy mass transfer, inhabited structure. Observe marker line blue. He stared at the words. Nothing about the warning had been deceptive. The Empire had crossed it because the warning sounded too mundane to matter. Grand Marshal, he said, we were told exactly what this place was doing. Than looked at the bulletin. Yes, we classified it as civilian traffic control. Yes. Tovin waited. Than's mouth tightened. Put that in the report too. The first ship chosen for withdrawal was the destroyer that had nearly collided with Cruiser 7. Its captain requested a direct channel to Aster Reach. Nessa accepted. This is Commander HFY, said the Taraxian officer. His voice carried no ceremony. Confirm that your field is disengaged. Confirmed on your hull, Nessa said. You have independent movement. My sensors still show a human envelope nearby. That is Morrow II holding the empty brace behind you. There was a pause. The commander checked. The brace damaged by the Imperial shot had continued drifting toward his path. Morrow too had captured it without anyone on the Imperial bridge noticing. Eshek's voice changed slightly. Understood. Your safest outbound vector is being transmitted. We can calculate our own. I assumed you could. Ours accounts for the refinery's next rotation. Another pause. Vector received. The destroyer backed away. Nessa watched until it cleared the work line, then removed its track from the active custody board. Not from evidence, just from work. That distinction mattered to her. Aster Reach crews were not trained to think in victories. They thought in unresolved loads, open pressure doors, hot machinery, occupied spaces, and jobs that remained unsafe until the last hazard was physically gone. Mara watched the Imperial destroyer leave. Do you think they'll come back? Maybe. That doesn't bother you? It bothers me. You don't look bothered. Nessa glanced at her. I am at work. Mara decided that was the end of the answer. On Crown of Val, Than received the first message from the Imperial War Directorate. It contained no praise and no accusation. Status of human homeworld mobilization. He read it twice. Operations offered several possible responses, each technically accurate and politically safer than the simplest answer. No confirmed fleet surge. Regional movements observed. Human readiness uncertain. Than rejected them all. He dictated 4 words. No homeworld mobilization observed. The response returned almost immediately. Explain. Than looked through the forward display at 6 industrial tenders controlling the withdrawal of an Imperial expedition. He almost found the demand insulting. Then he remembered how confident he had been less than an hour earlier. Send full telemetry, he said. All of it, Tovin turned. The mass comparisons too? Especially those, the War Directorate needed to experience the same collapse of assumption without the comfort of distance. Than added the raw Morrow specifications, refinery spine handling records, force distribution maps, and the cruiser rescue sequence. He did not edit out the moment human operators released a secured enemy vessel to prevent 2 Imperial ships from colliding. That was the most important evidence. A weapon could be exaggerated. A victory could be lucky. Restraint under advantage was harder to misread. The Directorate sent no immediate reply. Meanwhile, another Imperial cruiser withdrew, then a logistics escort, then 2 destroyers. Each departure reduced the tactical clutter. Each also revealed how much human effort had been spent not merely controlling ships, but preserving safe separation between them. Tovin calculated the cumulative load history. Morrow 5 had briefly exceeded its continuous civilian rating to save Cruiser 7. Morrow 3 had surrendered a stronger custody position to help. Morrow 2 had captured drifting debris while still managing a warship. None of those decisions maximized enemy damage. They maximized control. Than saw Tovin's analysis. Would they have held us indefinitely? No, why not? Het. Crew fatigue, field alignment, machinery limits. If we had remained in continued coordinated pressure, eventually something would have failed. Operations seized on that, so they were not dominant. Tovin looked at him. That is not what the data says. Then what does it say? It says they had limits. The officer frowned. That is the same thing. No, a bridge has a load limit. That does not mean walking across it is a contest. Than turned toward Tovin. The structural officer immediately looked uncomfortable, but Than only said, "Continue." Tovin placed the key chart on the display. The relevant question is not whether the tenders could hold the entire expedition forever. It is whether we could reach the Linden corridor before they delayed us long enough for military forces to arrive without destroying inhabited civilian infrastructure. He highlighted the patrol arrival times. We could not. The operations chief studied the chart. And if we destroyed the yard, then we would have converted an unsuccessful penetration into an attack on inhabited industrial infrastructure while human military forces remained largely uncommitted. Than finished the thought. And Earth would finally notice. Nobody found that outcome attractive anymore. Another War Directorate message arrived. It was shorter. Suspend offensive advance, preserve expedition, await political review. Than read it aloud. No one celebrated. The order did not create the withdrawal. It acknowledged the reality already visible at Aster Reach. The Grand Marshal sent confirmation and then opened the channel to Nessa one final time.
Superintendent Cole, go ahead. My government has ordered suspension of offensive advance. Understood. You will release all remaining vessels as they establish safe outbound vectors. Than glanced at Tovin's board.
You keep saying safe? Yes. You know we declared war on you? Yes. And fired on your equipment? Yes. Why are you still responsible for our safety? Nessa took long enough to answer that Than thought the channel might have dropped. Then she said, because you are inside my work zone. That was all. Than muted the channel. Tovin looked down at his console. The Grand Marshal stared at the human yard for several seconds. Then he said very quietly, put that in the report too. The sentence spread across the bridge more effectively than an order. For Tovin, it completed the pattern. The humans had not drawn a moral distinction between moving a refinery section safely and restraining an enemy cruiser safely. Both were inhabited masses inside a volume for which somebody had accepted responsibility. The Empire had arrived expecting military identity to dominate every other category. Aster Reach had answered with an older discipline. If a load contained people, control came before pride. He checked Earth traffic again. Passenger schedules had changed around the exclusion zone, but not across the planet. Orbital freight continued. Lunar construction traffic remained on ordinary routing. Civil weather satellites kept their maintenance windows. No emergency pattern appeared in the inner system. The declaration had entered human records. It had not seized human life. Than saw the same feed. Do they understand what was declared? Operations asked. Yes, he said. Then how can their traffic remain normal? Than watched another Imperial ship ease backward through the blue line, because this was supposed to become their emergency, he said. So far, it is only ours? Tovin saved that sentence separately. He suspected the War Directorate would need it. Exactly. The first Armistice Authority arrived by relay before the expedition had fully cleared Aster Reach. Imperial Legal Command did not call it surrender. Human Regional Defense did not call it one either. The declaration of war was suspended pending review. The opening expedition was ordered to withdraw to the previous recognized boundary. Human regional patrol groups remained outside the construction volume exactly as Nessa had requested. Only after the last Imperial cruiser had crossed Marker Line Blue did two human military vessels appear on the far tactical display. They did not accelerate toward the Empire. They took station near the Linden Corridor and waited. Than studied them. Those were the reinforcements? Tovin checked the transit log. Regional patrol craft. How long have they been there? They arrived 9 minutes ago. And they stayed out. Yes, Than looked back toward the 6 tenders. The war, as he had imagined it, had never reached the people trained to fight it. That realization was more difficult to process than defeat. Earth had not gambled everything on a hidden fleet. Earth had not ignored the declaration because it lacked seriousness. It had delegated the first response to the level at which the threat could be contained. Than had mistaken the absence of centralized panic for the absence of capability. His empire was centralized by instinct. Every great danger climbed upward. Every strategic insult demanded visible response from the center. A declaration of war was supposed to drag the enemy capital into the event. Humanity had done something else. A remote industrial superintendent had received the declaration, checked the local problem, informed regional defense, and continued moving workers out of an unfinished refinery. The Empire had tried to make Earth notice. Aster Reach had solved the interruption first. Tovin sent the classification amendment. The text moved through Imperial command channels under Grand Marshal authority. Moroclassis and equivalent Hummin heavy industrial mass control craft are to be treated as strategic capability platforms when operating within active industrial geometry. Hostile entry into Hummin heavy mass work volumes requires the tour to level authorizations and structural maneuver analysis. Civilian registry status is not a valid indicator of tactical capability. Than read it once, then added one sentence. Do not assume absence of fleet mobilization indicates absence of resistance. He signed the amendment. The Empire's first doctrinal change of the war existed before the war itself had lasted long enough for Earth to change shifts. At Aster Reach, Mara raised one finger from the communication station. Priority packet from Earth? Leo looked over. There it is. Nessa remained focused on the refinery spine. Read it? Mara opened the packet. Her expression changed. What? It confirms regional defense had local authority. It requests preservation of all telemetry and recordings for review. That all? There's a readiness note. Nessa finally looked at her. Mara read it. Earth defense posture remains at existing level pending Imperial compliance with suspension terms. Leo laughed once before covering it with a cough. Nessa did not laugh. She looked through the forward glass at the immense refinery spine. Its scheduled rotation had drifted behind by 14 minutes. Fine, she said. Tell Base 6 we're resuming transfer. Mara blinked. Now, we still have a refinery to build. Outside, the Morrow tenders shifted formation again, not around warships this time, around work. Morrow 1 returned to the forward end of the spine. 2 and 3 moved toward the side truss. 4 dropped toward Base 6. 5 slowed to cool its overloaded maneuver clusters. 6 took the free side of the structure and opened its custody vanes. The same deep vibration returned to the yard. Toven heard it through Crown of Val's long-range sensors as the Imperial command cruiser withdrew. A low industrial hum, he watched the human structure begin moving again. On the bridge around him, officers were compiling battle reports, damage summaries, command justifications, tactical amendments, and political projections. The Empire would spend weeks deciding what the first hour had meant. The humans had already gone back to construction. Than stood beside Toven. Was the refinery movement deliberate, he asked. Toven knew what he meant. Deliberate as a weapon? Yes. Toven reviewed the human construction schedule one last time. Base 6 had always been the next destination. The refinery spine had been scheduled to cross the same work volume before the Imperial fleet arrived. No, Toven said. Than's expression did not change. That is somehow worse, Toven almost agreed. But worse was the wrong word now, more important perhaps. More dangerous to misunderstand. He looked at the Morrow tender specifications once more. The mass figures were still absurd by Imperial naval standards. They were also ordinary by human industrial standards. The category error had belonged entirely to the Empire. A civilian label had not meant weak. A lack of guns had not meant harmless. A lack of panic had not meant unprepared. Than closed the registry file. Transmit withdrawal confirmation. Operations did so. The last Imperial formation turned away from Aster Reach. No human vessel followed. No Triumph broadcast chased them. No weapon fired into their retreat. Behind them, the refinery spine rotated another fraction of a degree. Inside the Aster Reach control room, Nessa finally sat. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. Leo placed a new load indicator wax tab beside her slate. The old one is ruined. Nessa peeled the curled tab from its edge and dropped it into the process bin. Any deformation on the forward coupling? None. Morrow 5. Cooling. Worker transfers? All secure. Then reset the load model for Base 6. Leo did. The new wax tab lay perfectly flat beside the grease pinley figures. On the far pane, a small status marker showed the Imperial expedition withdrawing beyond local control space. Nessa never enlarged it. The unfinished refinery spine kept turning. Beyond its black framework, the last Imperial drive flare slipped behind the structure and vanished. The wax tab did not move.